The fourth commandment is one that could get me in trouble real fast. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your manservant or maidservant, nor your animals, nor the alien within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Keeping the Sabbath holy. There might be some people within the sound of my voice that may think I'm a little bit old-fashioned when I say that I have trouble spending money on Sunday except for essentials like food. I have to tell you that a few weeks ago, after dinner, I went out to dinner with my kids. It was the Sunday that you ladies, a bunch of you, went down to that play. It was my birthday, and Kurt and Jennifer took me out to dinner that day. And after dinner, we went to a couple of stores. I didn't buy anything, but I walked in them, and I felt guilty for going in these stores on Sunday and looking around. I felt like I was doing something awful. And then as we were coming out of the one store, I saw one of my fellow Nazarene pastors walking in with his kids in tow. And so I didn't feel quite as bad then, but I still felt bad. I'll just tell you, I felt like I was doing something horribly wrong. On Sundays, I refrain from buying items such as gas unless I'm traveling and I absolutely have to. I don't buy groceries on Sunday. I don't buy clothes. I don't cut my grass or wash my car or do laundry or clean house, or I could go on with a number of things that I don't do on Sundays. I do eat out on Sundays. And I suppose that comes from the way that I was raised. We ate out a lot of Sundays. And my dad had the attitude, we're going to eat out on Sunday because it's either the restaurant's open already, we're going to go there eat, or your mother's going to go home and slave over a hot stove and spend all afternoon cleaning up that mess before we go back to church. Eating is something that's necessary, and we looked at it that way, and I still look at it that way to this day. Believe me, eating is necessary. I have not always believed in these, but I now find a good Nazarene nap an inviting thought. I did not get one last Sunday afternoon, but I still find those a very inviting thought. In fact, sometimes I find that carrying over into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Not very often, but sometimes that happens. When I was growing up on Sunday, we went to church. I mentioned we often ate out. We visited grandparents. About once a month, we would leave church on Sunday afternoon at 12 o'clock and rush the hour and a half to my grandparents' house, who lived 100 miles away. Grandma always had dinner on the table at 2 o'clock on Sunday, and everybody in the family knew it. 3 families of us were in the Detroit area. One was 100 miles north of where they lived, and often we would all congregate at their big farmhouse on Sunday afternoon for dinner. If no one showed up, Grandpa had great leftovers all week to eat, and he was happy for them. On Sundays that we didn't go there, we went and visited my other grandparents. We played table games. Sometimes we went for family walks. Sometimes we even went out to a picnic once in a while just to have a relaxing afternoon in the park. For some reason, the newspaper did not get read on afternoons, and the TV stayed off until after Sunday night church. So I grew up thinking, oh, if I turn the TV on Sunday afternoon, it's horrible. I feel bad. And to this day, I still have trouble watching TV on Sunday afternoons. But after church at night, it's okay. A lot of it has to do with the way we're raised. I could go on all day. I could speak about things. Individual beliefs have become like the New Testament Pharisees who grumbled about Jesus and the disciples picking corn on the Sabbath and calling it work. They had to eat. And yet the Pharisees called it work. Sabbath rest is all about the work issue, yet it goes far beyond what most of us even imagine. If I look at the history of Sabbath rest, I go back to Genesis chapter 2, the very first verses in there. God abstained from His work. He ceased from work. He had made creation in 6 days. It culminated with making man and woman, and then He rested from His work. He sanctified the day. He made it holy. He pulled it apart from the rest of those days for a definite purpose. If I look through my Bible from Adam to Joseph, I find no mention of the Sabbath. No mention of this day of rest. And yet, in Exodus 16, I find a note to the Israelites. Do not collect manna on the 7th day. Collect double on the 6th that will keep overnight. Now, there's some interesting facts there. When the Israelites were wandering, God magically appeared food to them every day. Manna from heaven. They had to eat what they collected on that day. They couldn't save it for the next day because if the next day they went to it, it was spoiled and they couldn't eat. Have you ever eaten anything that was spoiled? Oh, nasty. Sometimes it makes you sick. They just learned, probably the hard way, not to try to save anything till the next day, because by faith they had to believe that God was going to take care of their needs. And so they would collect this magical food that came from heaven. They would eat it all that day. And the next day they would go out and collect this magical food from heaven and eat it all that day. And God said, on the 6th day, though, collect double. Eat half of it. The other half will still be good on the Sabbath day. And then on Monday, or on Sunday, whatever day it was then, the next day you'll find more out there in the fields for you. It was a matter of trusting God. It was a matter of saying, God is telling you, do not work on this day. And collecting your food is work. And so we find a story there in Exodus 16 where they didn't listen to God. And so on the 6th day, they collected enough for 1 day. They went out on the 7th day, and guess what? They didn't find one thing. Why? Because God had told them, rest on the Sabbath. Do not go out and work. Do not go out in those fields and sweat. Do not go out and look for your food. And so they learned the hard way to collect double on the 6th, and it would be still good on the 7th. And they'd be supplied more on the 1st. I find that very interesting in our lives. So many times God will tell us to do something, and we don't follow His instructions, and we wonder why it gets messed up or why we get in a bind. That's what happened to the people there. Commandment number 4. Keep the Sabbath day holy. You have to remember that the Israelites had been slaves. They had worked 7 days a week for 400 years. It had become a lifestyle. And all of a sudden, here is God pulling them out of this lifestyle, pulling them out of this horrible thing of being into slavery, and He's saying to them, you'll have a day of rest. A day where you don't have to work. A day where you don't have to go out and meet the world. A day where you don't have to go out and think about everything under the sun. A day where you don't have to deal about business issues. A day where you don't have to worry about your food. Enjoy it. Worship God. Worship the creation. I look at things all down through history, and I find places where in the Scriptures where places were described as being holy. People would have an encounter with God in a certain place, and they would go find a big pile of rocks, and they would pile them up and name them, and this is the place where God met me. This place is holy. And they would keep coming back to that place to make their sacrifices and to meet God there at that place. Here in the Ten Commandments and the fourth commandment, I find God taking and making time holy. 6 days you will work. The seventh day will be a holy day given to God. I look at things down through history. I look at scientific things. I look at what doctors tell us. I look at all creation. And I read here, and it says in the Scriptures, don't expect anybody to work. You or your son or your daughter or your servants or your animals or that person who has come in from without your gates who is doing things there as well. Don't expect them to work. It's a simple fact. If you work an animal day after day after day, 7 days a week, year after year after year, that animal's going to cave in and not be able to do its work. That animal needs some rest. Slaves and workhorses back then were the backbones of the country, of the company, so to speak. And they needed to be protected and given that time off to do what needed to be done, to rest, to recuperate, to get in touch with the Creator, to allow God to bathe their souls, to allow muscles to refresh so they could go back to work that next day. We live in a day and age where we're so busy, where there's things going on all the time. People work on their homes on Sunday. They work on recreational matters on Sunday. They're just busy all the time. God calls from His holy mountain, stop. Take time to worship the Creator. I look in Exodus chapter 31 around verses 14, 15, 16, 17, and I find some verses there that say, if you find anybody who's working on the Sabbath, are you ready for this? Put them to death. It was a serious matter back there. When God said, I want you to rest, it was a sign to us to get in touch with our Creator. It was a covenant. If you rest on the Sabbath, I will come and meet all of your needs. God rested. He was refreshed. In Exodus 31:13, we find that our spiritual grace comes from God. It says, He makes us holy. It's not what we do. It's not all the work we do. It's not all the things we are involved in. It's not all the good that we do. It's God who makes us holy. He makes us holy. There's a rhythm of grace. Our grace comes from God. That rhythm of grace is work, rest, and admire. We work 6 days. We rest 1 day. We admire God on that day. We work 6 days. We rest. We admire God on that day. It's not 7, 7, 7 and squeezing God somewhere into there. It's taking 1 day away from all the business matters of the world. Why? So God can make us holy. So God can get our attention. So God can look at us and say, here's what I need you to do. Here's how I want to refresh you. Here's how I want to get involved in your lives. When we keep going 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, we try to make ourselves whatever. But God says, let me make you. Well, I look at all this. I look at what God says about the Sabbath. I look at what's in the Bible, and I hear people say, oh, but that's old-fashioned stuff. I have spent my entire life looking at what is the ideal Sabbath. I remember when one of my friends turned 13, there was a whole bunch of us turning 13 that same time, and this one friend's parents threw him a birthday party. He had all of his friends who were all turning 13 that same year over that day, Sunday afternoon after church, to celebrate his birthday. And we went to their house, and we had dinner, and after dinner, of course, back in those days, everybody dressed up, wore a suit and a tie, even the kids to church. And they told us, bring play clothes. And we took play clothes. Now, it was not unusual to go home on Sunday afternoon to change clothes, to get dressed up, to go back to evening service again. So that was no question. When I said I needed to take play clothes, my parents were fine with it. But after church on the way home, I remember my dad saying, "So what did you guys do this afternoon?" "We went to the park and played touch football." "You did what?" My dad about had a coronary. My mother had a cow. That was hard driving home with that cow in the car. And, anyhow, I'm just trying to see if you're awake. You are. They had a fit about that. Back in Jesus' day, there were laws. Don't travel, don't pick grain for a snack, don't heal the sick. The Sabbath became a burden to man. A whole list of don'ts. You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't go here, you can't go there. How many grew up like that? Yeah, that's what I thought. Probably people online this morning going, "Oh yeah, we remember those days." Death in Exodus and in Numbers for breaking the Sabbath. Nehemiah 10:31 had rules against buying and selling on the Sabbath. It also mentions there about not just the seventh day rest, but the seventh year rest. Don't grow any crops on the seventh year. Let the ground rest. Now, I don't know a lot about farming, but I know enough to know that once in a while the earth has to rest to get its energy back to grow crops. They rotate crops on different fields by the different years to get different nutrients into the fields so that they're working fields and plentiful. Now, also when I look there in Nehemiah, I also find this thing about in the seventh year rest and canceling all debts. Now, back about 19 years ago, I preached a whole series of sermons on getting ready for the Jubilee. Jubilee is the 50th year, and the 50th year was a time to refresh. Well, if I'm not mistaken, we're coming up to a 7-year time here, maybe 2019 or 2020. Wouldn't that be nice to have all of our debts canceled? Well, it's not going to happen, but it would be nice. I say all that to say this. Jesus himself got involved with the Sabbath. In Mark 2:27, he says, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath." And so when I look at the Sabbath from a little bit wiser standpoint, it is, don't get involved in all the rules and the hypocrisy and the laws about the Sabbath. Enjoy a day away from the business of the world. Enjoy a day away from not having to think about everything. Enjoy a day when you can set things aside, worship the Creator, and allow Him to refresh your soul. I look at creation. In Genesis 1:25, God looked around and said, "It was good." And then He created humans, and then He said, "It was very good." And then He gave them a day to enjoy. God rested, God ceased, God abstained, and He rested from creating. We spend 6 days creating, working, being involved in things. Some Bible scholars feel that if you're not doing what you do to your full potential on those 6 days, then you're also breaking the commandment, because it says 6 days you shall work. If you're not involved in something fruitful during those 6 days, it doesn't matter if you're retired or whatever. If you're not involved in something fruitful on those 6 days, even if it's getting down and praying for everybody else in the church because you can't do it anymore, then you're breaking that commandment. 6 days you shall work, then rest on the seventh. Now look at Sunday activities. What can we really do on a Sunday? I got to tell you that a lot of people I know go golfing on Sunday. Well, what I have to tell you is they claim they pray more on the golf course than they do in church, but please, Lord, give me a birdie does not qualify for worship. We need a spiritual focus in our lives. I have to tell you that about 3 weeks ago now, I helped Kurt do some work on a Sunday afternoon. We emptied that storage bin. It was a matter of emptying this storage bin or paying another month on it. So it became a matter of stewardship. We came to church, we worshiped. We went and ate dinner together. And then we went and emptied this storage bin late afternoon. One of our church folks called me that afternoon while we were there and said, Pastor, are you busy right now? And I went, no, I'm just standing around here because I'm tired of lifting things. I figured Henry could help Kurt lift the stuff, and I'd just drive the van over with whatever went in the van. And they finally said, well, what are you doing? It sounds like you're outside. And I said, I'm breaking the Sabbath. I'm working. But you see, at that point, it was called getting the ox out of the ditch. Years back, I was leaving for a conference on Monday morning. Our car broke down on Sunday afternoon. Now, I was going with other people, so it didn't matter to me. I didn't need the car. But Marcy did. She was going to be home all week. And I was assistant pastor of the church. And the pastor said, oh man, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to have to lay under the car this afternoon and get that exhaust system tied up there, at least to hold it for the week, so Marcy can get around and do what he has to do. He went, oh, don't do it out in your yard. There's too many church people that live here by us that will just be upset if they see you out working. He said, pull it around to my garage and do it there. So that's what I did. I got the ox out of the ditch on Sunday afternoon. There are some work things that are absolutely necessary to do on the Sabbath, and that's what happened with the disciples. Getting corn, they had to eat. They went and picked the corn. They were not working. They were not breaking the Sabbath. They were taking care of a real need that had to be met. I got to tell you, when I was laying in the hospital a little over a year ago on a Sunday, I was glad that there were nurses there. I was glad that there were doctors there who were able to run the test to make sure there was nothing serious wrong. I was glad that there were food service people there because I like to eat. Some work is necessary on the Sabbath. Dan, I'm glad that there are people who worked in their career that you did that kept the lights on Sunday, especially on a hot day, because I like my air conditioning. I suppose in an ideal world, all those who worship on Saturday would work on Sunday to feed all of us who worship on Sunday, and all those who worship on Sunday would work on Saturday to feed all those who worship on Saturday. That would be ideal. What I have to say about the Sabbath is I can't tell you what to do on the Sabbath. I can't tell you how to live your life. All I can tell you is take a day a week. Get into the Word. Worship God. Let God refresh your soul. Get out in His creation and glorify God and praise Him and thank Him for what He has made and what He has done and what He's doing in your life. And you'll find it a total difference. Take a day and get away from the banking and get away from the law stuff and get away from the physical work and allow your body to refresh. Allow your soul to refresh in the love and in the grace of God. The Sabbath is a gift from God. It doesn't give me a license to do just any old thing. It's a call to worship. When I was managing the campgrounds up where our home is in Michigan, the Nazarene camp, they had a lot of rules up there for Sunday. You couldn't swim on Sunday because it was holy ground. And it was my job as campgrounds manager to make sure that nobody was in the lake on Sunday afternoons. And often the house phone would ring or somebody would come by the house and say, I was just down by the lake and there's somebody in the water. You better go chase them out. Well, you know what I would do? Okay. And I would sit back and kick back for about an hour. And then I would go down by the lake and pray, oh Lord, let them have left. Because the truth be told, I wanted to be in the water with them. Especially if it was 90 degrees out and we didn't have air at that time. I had a phone call from a guy one day. He said, listen, this is back when cell phones first came out. He called me and said, Greg, listen, there's some teens over playing basketball on the basketball court. Will you go make them stop? Well, I looked out my back window to see who they were. They were there. Here he was on his cell phone with his golf club in hands, driving golf balls along the edge of the ball field. And I said, well, Jim, I'll tell you what. When you go home and stop driving golf balls on Sunday afternoon, I'll tell those teens to stop playing as well. Well, I'm relaxing and enjoying life. I said, so are they. We cannot get dogmatic about it. We cannot nitpick about it. We need to worship God. We need to relax. We need to enjoy. I cannot tell you what to do. You cannot tell me how to live on Sunday. The Sabbath is a call to worship. It's also a call to corporate worship. I look over at Hebrews 10:25 and it says, do not forsake the meeting together with God's people, the fellowship of God's people, because you need to get together to worship God and to encourage one another in the faith. I don't know about you, but when I get out in this world during the week and I'm dealing with all kinds of business stuff, both personally and for the church, I get drugged down. It's hard dealing with some of the stuff you got to deal with. People are stuck in their heads, yes, you know what I'm talking about. And I need that day to come together with God's people to worship and to be encouraged and to be prayed for and to pray for other people and to be reminded that God's still on His throne, that God is still alive and well. The Sabbath day is a day to demonstrate our highest values. It's a day where we reflect on our lives and learn how to control our base reactions to others. It's a perfect time to look back and say, Lord, what do I need to improve for this next week? What in my life went kaflooey this past week, and what do I need to change for this next week? I had to apologize a few times in the last month or so to different people because I reacted wrongly in situations. It wasn't that I expressed my opinion, it was the way I reacted. And so when I look at the Sabbath, it gives me time to stop and think, how did I react? What did I do? Yes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for that. And Lord, help me to control those base reactions by allowing me to worship you. The Sabbath is a perfect time to work on the holiness in our lives so we can live the Christian life for another week. It's not about time off. It's not about resting and sleeping all day. It's not about going to sports events all day or whatever. It's about sacred time before and with a holy God. I often am just asking myself a question. Can I do what I plan to do today and be holy before God? That's not just for Sunday. That's for every day of the week. If I'm worshiping God on Sunday, the rest of my life will take place. Isaiah 58, verses 13 and 14. If you keep your feet from breaking the Sabbath, and from doing as you please on my holy day, if you call the Sabbath a delight, and the Lord's holy day honorable, and if you honor it by not going on your own way, and not doing as you please or speaking idle words, then you will find your joy in the Lord. And I will cause you to ride on the heights of the land, and to feast on the inheritance of your father Jacob. The mouth of the Lord has spoken. I really like that part. Finding your joy in the Lord. Live according to God's commandments. These first 4 commandments talk about our relationship to God. Talk about allowing God just to flood our souls. When we do that, His pleasure, His joy comes into our lives. We're going to sing a song called Gentle Shepherd. It's talking about Jesus shepherding our lives, but it's really about God shepherding our lives.